Okay, here's the deal. I know you're here for gaming news, and this is that, but it does get a bit odd when it turns into mergers and acquisitions news. This time, though, it is pretty damn impactful. This is absolutely going to suck for Microsoft and, of course, for Activision-Blizzard, and that's why we absolutely have got to get into today's story. Might be a tad dense. I'll try to make it nice and smooth for you, but it certainly is a bloody interesting story, I've got to say that. So we did talk about how the Competition and Mergers Authority of the United Kingdom was taking a little bit of interest in this case, but per Gaming World Observer, they are definitely taking a look. They're actually moving forward with the more in-depth investigation of this merger, of course, on the grounds that it could be anti-competitive, and this comes amid Phil Spencer making more of a public, it's okay, happy statement, whereas Jim Ryan, the head of PlayStation, well, he was pretty damn public about the terms not being good for Sony with Call of Duty. Call of Duty was one of the places where the CMA were, particularly concerned. So Microsoft at the time of this had made a bit of a public show of, addressing the concerns with their public statement, but per the sources of the Financial Times, in private, they were actually much less interested in responding. Here's the excerpt. According to people familiar with the matter, Microsoft decided not to cooperate with the CMA this time, because the regulator would probably accept no undertaking from the company. As one competition lawyer put it, it was almost impossible for Microsoft to move away from the in-depth investigation at this stage. So that does mean that the real shit's going to actually happen. Now, of course, Phil Spencer made his public statement about Call of Duty. Jim Ryan said that, who of course is of PlayStation, said that Microsoft had offered them very unfavorable terms. And because of that, we're now thinking that it's likely that regulators are going to take a pretty damn dim view of the info that's being provided to them. And of course, the CMA themselves have actually confirmed this in their announcement, right? Where they said Microsoft informed the CMA that it would not offer undertakings to the CMA, and that because of that, they have made the decision to refer this to the newly established panel of merger experts from the CMA, which means the shit's happening. And we know very much on what grounds it's happening. There are 3 points here. The distribution of games through multi-game subscription services. Now, I think that one is a bit funky because Sony also do have an extremely competitive offering in that space, so that's probably good for Microsoft. If Sony didn't have that and Microsoft was just muscling in with, kind of gobbling up everything, then perhaps they, wouldn't get away so easily. Also, the supply of cloud gaming services. That's an interesting one. I mean, Microsoft can provide that through Azure. Sony, of course, have been doing a lot of that with, PS Now. Streaming is actually integrated into the new PS Plus, so not sure about that. And then also the manufacture and supply of gaming consoles together with their digital storefronts. So this is kind of an interesting one where that's being clearly articulated as opposed to being a side effect of the previous investigation based on the idea that losing Call of Duty would in fact, impact the purchase of future PlayStations. And let's make no mistake, just like Sony will now not sell PS5s because people will want to play Skyrim on their Xbox, if they lose Call of Duty, then yeah, a hell of a lot less people will be buying a PlayStation. That is absolutely for damn sure. So, what does this actually mean for the acquisition then? How much of a thorn could this be in the side of Satya Nadella, of Phil Spencer, and of Bobby Kotick? Well, in March 2022, CMA referred a Phase 2 investigation into the acquisition of Avast, the antivirus, by Norton LifeLock. Now, this is just as an example. So this Phase 2 investigation lasted from March until August. It was found that the acquisition would substantially reduce competition in the UK. After that, there was a 3-week public consultation that ended August 24th, where the provisional findings were reviewed and any further objections could be raised. Then that ended the 2nd of September when they announced that they had cleared the merger. So, basically, 6-month delay, right? That was a $6 billion value thing, whereas this transaction will be a $68.7-ish billion transaction, which is really rather large. Now, one of the good things is that because the CMA are a public body, there's actually a lot of freely available data that we can look into. And this can basically just tell us, when a phase 2 investigation is required, what's the sort of thing that ends up happening. So we can see here the total referred, the number cleared, prohibited with, remedies behaviorally in terms of divestures or cancelled or abandoned. You can see a fair few cancelled or abandoned, and you can also see, a fair few being prohibited, actually. To the stage where, it's more likely than not that some form of action will actually happen. And to explain what those forms of action are, clearance just means no threat to competition, fire away, do your merger. Prohibited means it cannot proceed because it would be a threat to competition in the UK. That's that. That would be pretty shit news. Behavioral remedies, which is basically just set up a legally binding agreement that will ensure the good state of competition going forward. Divestiture is basically saying, right, you can merge, but you've got to sell off or spin out, some of your assets, basically. And then cancelled or abandoned is just when the parties say, you know what, screw this, we're not doing it anymore. So overall, what you can see is the CMA are not afraid of using their powers. They have actually done so regularly in recent years. So at the very least, expect some form of delay here for Activision-Blizzard and for Microsoft, but also potentially something could actually happen. And in terms of what will happen, I think it will be a behavioral solution, because if it was divestiture and they just said, hey, Activision, spin Call of Duty out to the Call of Duty company, Activision would turn around and be like, okay, shit, we've got nothing left. So I think it almost certainly won't be that. But a behavioral thing, now that actually could work. I am fairly sure it came out that basically Phil had said, look, you're definitely getting 3 years of Call of Duty, and, beyond that, we'll see. That evidently was not good enough for Jim to be happy, right? Jim and the crew over at PlayStation. So imagine some sort of behavioral thing. I would say at least that probably Microsoft's best way to get out of this, and again, this is a layperson's perspective, but we do know that Sony are trying to spin up some sort of free-to-play games. Some of these are in the shooter space from Deviation. We have an upcoming story, though, because it seems like Deviation is going through troubles. If Microsoft could convince that, look, by the time the PS6 rolls around, Sony will have a first-party competitor to Call of Duty, and then, Call of Duty can be our one, perhaps then they could sort of get the clearance. But anything that means yanking Call of Duty whenever Sony don't have, their own thing, I just don't think that's really going to be accepted. And as we then zoom out, we do have Sony's comment from this, which I think, they're happy. This is fantastic news for Sony. But also we've got the fact that the Federal Trade Commission in America has yet to do their thing in this, and the EU is looming. Apparently Activision and Xbox have been preparing for the EU investigation for a while. Obviously, Microsoft have got in trouble with the EU for anti-competitive things before, so that'll be fun. They've had so pre-notification talks have been ongoing with Brussels regulators since January of this year, and the expectation is that the EU will be applying a similar level of scrutiny to what the UK is doing. So that basically means they need to get ready for the long haul. This is not going to be approved and signed off on quickly. Absolutely not. And as for Sony's comment here, this is what they said. By giving Microsoft control of Activision games like Call of Duty, you can see they're drilling in Call of Duty. I think they know that is their strongest point, right? Like two massive games, Call of Duty and FIFA. And I imagine that if Microsoft went and tried to buy Electronic Arts, maybe there'd be a similar discussion here surrounding FIFA. Of course, not going to be called FIFA for too much longer, but you get my point. So this deal will have major negative implications for gamers and the future of the gaming industry. We want to guarantee PlayStation gamers continue to have the highest quality gaming experience, and we appreciate the CMA's focus on protecting gamers. Well, of course Sony does. I don't think they've looked into their situation with Bungie that much, but certainly while Destiny 2 is a big game, it's no Call of Duty. Call of Duty truly is absolutely ginormous on the consoles. but perhaps less and less so if they keep on pulling out a Vanguard. But the next installment is going to be Modern Warfare 2 the second, which, yeah, I imagine will actually do quite well. Okay then, so this is all very interesting. I mean, we talked about a while ago how Berkshire Hathaway, which, I mean, if you know the fairly legendary investor Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, that's their company, they were performing, at least the belief was, a bit of merger arbitrage, right? Where the price that Activision-Blizzard stock was going for, you know, on the market, where that was actually lower than what the agreed price for, you know, for the merger deal would be. And of course, that would mean a very handsome payday if the merger actually does go through, right? So, you know, there was a lot of bullish sentiment, I think, in the past. A lot of people saying, hey, you know what? This is going to be fine. We'll sail through. It's not really that bad. But now we actually are coming up against some resistance. And if I was to just take a quick look at the markets here now, I don't exactly claim to be able to just, you know, be a magical person and read all of the wisdoms into this chart, but you can certainly see, you can see that the line has went down. Right? You know, it definitely did go down a bit. You know, not humongously. I mean, if you look at this, it's between $76 and $81. If you kind of look at that year to date, I mean, it is a fairly, you know, it is fairly level. I mean, I believe, like, I think we might know why this went from 64 all the way up to 82. Just a hunch. Though even I remember when, you know, with Twitter stock, we, of course, had... you know, a lot of people thinking they were going to do some merger arbitrage whenever Elon Musk announced that he was going to purchase the company for whatever the share price was. And, of course, a lot of that then fell off whenever Musk announced that he was, you know, that he was intending to pull out of the deal. So who knows what it's going to be like for the people who are playing around in the market. Certainly, if somebody went, you know, very bullish on Twitter being sold soon and Activision-Blizzard being sold soon, then maybe things aren't exactly panning out how they would have expected. But that's basically the situation, okay? I don't really know what this is going to mean. I do have a suspicion that it will be a behavioral agreement, though. It was actually quite good. I learned a lot going through the doc that, you know, that Connor and our team prepared for both of us today. And I guess that can maybe give us an understanding of what could happen. I think one of those behavioral things where they just end up... You know, it's not a gentleman's handshake, it is legally bound that Call of Duty will be protected and will be safe. I think that's the most likely thing, because ultimately for Microsoft, I mean, sure, it would be nice they could do something with Call of Duty. I don't think they ever had a realistic expectation of doing something really aggressive with Call of Duty anytime soon. My personal suspicion is that at most, they want to do for, you know, the next generation of consoles, they want Call of Duty to be theirs. And I think they hope that they can just get away with it. So if they sign an agreement that says for 6 years there's Call of Duty in PlayStation, I think for Sony, that does kind of suck, because they know there is a ticking time bomb. But for Microsoft, that's still good, because they know that that is a major play that they can make whenever the next console generation starts. And as for Sony, they will just have to hope that they've got something ready in time. And even that could be in jeopardy, as apparently at Deviation Games, there have been a lot of staff departures amid, well, some rumors and murmurings. We'll get into that later next week, though. So that's it for today's video. Let me know, I suppose, what you think. It's kind of hard to tell how this could really impact any of us. Though at least for some of us, the idea that maybe Blizzard could operate with a more long-term outlook instead of quarterly get the money in, some of us think that could be good for the Blizzard games. But there's obviously bigger things at play. Anyway, have a good one, and we'll see you next time.